In 2017, a construction renaissance began. Computing power reached a point where construction companies could actually use it for the most complex construction processes, and immediately they're flooded in over $100 billion of venture capital into construction technology companies. Driven by that money, a whole bunch of technologies have come up over that time. You may be a little overwhelmed by it, but this is the question you've got to ask. How can you take advantage of the Renaissance to build faster, high-quality, cost-effective projects? That is the topic of discussion today with my guest, René Morkos. He is the founder and CEO of Alice Technologies and teaches at Stanford University's PhD program in construction management. The son of a civil engineer, René grew up in the construction industry, and he has worked on construction projects worldwide. Alice is an AI-powered construction simulation and optimization platform that helps GCs to easily create, explore, and update construction schedules that reduce risk while cutting construction costs by 11%. We have a terrific conversation today. It's one of my longer interviews, but you're going to want to listen to every single minute of it. We talk about things including the one position that you need to create in order to take advantage of this renaissance in your construction company, the three-step process that those folks need to go through when evaluating technology so that you pick the right technology for your organization. And then the one question that you as a construction company CEO must be asking yourself every night before you go to bed. And that question should drive the decisions you make when it comes to taking advantage of this construction renaissance. So whether you say Renaissance or Renaissance, it's happening. I'll tell you, this is a killer interview. You've got to spend time to listen to it. I know you're going to enjoy it. I really, really appreciate René's time. And please give me some feedback on this interview. What do you find most useful? What would you like to focus in on in further installments of these technology interviews that I have here on Construction Genius? And enjoy my discussion with René. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. René, welcome to Construction Genius.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I have a question for you. What is the difference between an orchestra and a construction crew?
One of my favorite questions for sure. The difference is that an orchestra gets to practice. An orchestra gets to practice thousands of times, whereas in construction, you only get to do the darn thing once. You get to build a unique product with a unique quote factory, right, one time. That's the difference.
So what is then the negative impact of that on the construction industry?
Oh my God, construction is a complicated field. And so a question we often get asked at Alice is, what are the critical tasks of my project? Mm-hmm. We often smile and say, well, do you want to know the critical tasks or the critical labor or the critical equipment or the critical calendars or the critical precedence relationships? A lot of these factors or variables interact in complex ways. It is not possible for the human brain to crunch the 3 or 10,000 constraints that you need in order to tease out or understand the complex interactions or patterns between these different variables. What you tend to see is if you were able to build your project 100 different times, you will learn from those 100 different ways of how it gets built, and you'll start to understand that, even though it might seem like the 3-crane option is faster, but actually it's about steel supply and not the number of cranes. Or it's actually, it might seem that doing overtime, in the month of October for everybody was the way to go, but actually all you need to do is work 2 extra shifts on Tuesday and Thursday, or whatever the insight is. So gaining deeper insights into how the complex variables that govern your projects interact is what you get by building it 100 different times before you build it.
Okay, so with that in mind, this idea of building it 100 different times, up to a certain period of time, that was impossible, right? You got to build it once, and if you're lucky, you got another project that was similar to it so that you could take your learnings and hopefully increase your profitability. But your perspective is that in 2017, something specifically began which has had a tremendous impact on the construction industry. Can you explain that a little bit to the audience?
I call it the construction renaissance, right? And I think a number of factors converged to result in, and I believe it's $170 billion were poured into construction tech that year. And I don't know the exact number. Somebody could look it up. It might be 130, but over $100 billion was poured into the field. The reason that happened is it wasn't a fluke. What happened was that, people often say like, oh, construction isn't innovative. I think that's complete bullshit. We just tend to work on bigger, more complex problems than everybody else. So we were the last ones to be digitized. It took the machines this long to catch up. The thing that really changed was that BIM, or parametric technology, right, for architectural design, the input of construction is design. We had to wait till 2015 for that to be digitized because the buildings are bigger, more complicated than engines. Once design got digitized, once the advent of cloud computing and the Moore's law, the number of processors doubles every 18 months, right? The machines were capable of crunching designs. Once they were capable of doing that, is I think one of the key pieces of the puzzle that enabled the digitization of construction, which is really what we started to see, 2017 moving forward, right? Hundreds of startups suddenly started, being birthed and being founded and digitizing the field. So incredibly exciting time. And the implications are, in my opinion, this is the most exciting time to be in construction in the last, arguably 2 millennia.
So it's very interesting here. You've got the digitization of the input. And as a result of that simulation is now possible?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. For the first time ever, you can build it 100 different times before you build it. And that's the thing that we've cracked at Alice, right? It's a generative construction simulator. So generative means that it just like generative design, right? It goes through lots and lots of permutations. It tries lots of different column heights and column widths and, slab sizes, right? With us, we don't try column heights. We try number of crews, number of cranes, overtime. And so those parameters or input variables change. The computer changes them, changes sequence, changes the number of crews, number of cranes, overtime, all those kind of things, rebuilds your job over and over again. We tend to go through 600 million options in the course of an afternoon, selecting the best 20 or 30. So you can kind of start thinking of how much efficiency you're squeezing out. Right.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because if I'm a construction project executive, or I get a new job, or I start interacting with the designer, I'm thinking many times in terms of scheduling. What's my schedule going to look like, and how am I going to apply resources to that schedule in order to do my best to bring the project in under budget and on time? And your contention is that mindset needs to shift a little bit in construction. Can you explain that?
Oh, 100%. Stop scheduling, start simulating. And it's really scheduling and estimating, right? But the thing that you want the computer to do is to start building your project for you, right? There's huge advantages that you gain by doing that, right? Because simply put, if the computer has built it for you inside the computer and something changes, you just tweak whatever, you say, hey, there was a delay, hit resimulate, and the software will say, okay, well, if you do nothing, you'll be 4 weeks late. Okay, well, resequence. If you resequence, you're 2 weeks late. Okay, try overtime. Oh, well, now you're a week ahead. Oh, but it's expensive. Okay, well, try maybe adding a crew. Try this. It's a dynamic system that enables you to, the cost of a change is zero.
Right.
And so once you simulate, right, you have, the other sort of upshot is that you have a very clear idea of how to build it. You've forced your project team, right, to be explicit in how, what the assumptions are, how we're going to go about building. You can't just fudge around, some kind of a schedule, right? You've got a very clear idea of what it is that you're doing.
It's interesting because I'm putting myself in the shoes of a construction executive or someone who's been in the industry, and perhaps there's a little skepticism here because, we do the simulation, and, it's just like when you might simulate a war game, but then when you start fighting the battle, stuff starts happening, and the simulation goes out the window, and then I just go back to doing what I do. How do you continue to simulate throughout a project so that you can take advantage of that computing power as you're going through the daily grind?
Yeah, so like Mike Tyson said, right? Everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. Right?
Yeah, right. Sounds like construction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely right. Things are always on time, never delayed. Everybody does exactly what they're supposed to. It's a stressful crispy job, and I love the hours. It's always a 40-hour work week, right?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, one of the reasons we created Alice was that, right? I got, I'm a second generation civil engineer, right? I got sick to teeth of, having my buddies who are in other fields, go home at, 5 or 6, regularly, right? You're on a construction job, pretty normal, 7, 8 p.m., you're still there. Right. And I think you should just have better shit to do. Right. So that's the question. We've released what we call the manage feature. Right. And that allows you to update progress, and the software will schedule and reschedule for you on the fly. Right. We're now working on what we call field manage, which is updating, progress directly from the field. Lots of different ways of doing it. There's companies out there that are sort of, automating it using AI. You can use, field sort of input. You can use centralized input. You can import an Excel spreadsheet, import a P6 update. There's lots of different ways, we enable you to do that. But the upshot is that the advantage that you gain is that one reason why people don't really like to use the schedule is the latency is too high. Mm-hmm. It takes 2 weeks to reschedule something. And it's like, if I'm on a job and I've got a delay, I don't have a week or 3 days or, whatever it is to wait for the information to be put in and then for it to get analyzed and crunched. With Alice, the paradigm shift, and I define a paradigm shift as 3 orders of magnitude improvement or greater in a metric. Okay. And so with us, the effort required to schedule and reschedule is 10,000 times less. Okay. That's the thing that's incredible. Like, that's the part where, like, at first people are like, no, I'm too busy, right? It's that kind of famous photo of the guy holding the sword, running to battle. Somebody's pointing at this machine gun, and the guy with the sword's like, I'm too busy. I got a war to fight. Yep. And it's really, we've seen this so many times, right? It's like, we understand that you think that what we're offering you is a sword. You think that what we're trying to get you to do is go back to the old way of doing things where it takes forever to schedule, reschedule. But what we've got is something very, very different, right? And once people see it, there's definitely that moment in the room where it's like, whoa. Like, people step back and go, wait, what the heck is this? Like, this isn't doing what I'm expecting it to do. And once they see that, hey, all you got to do is just tell me, what was completed, what's delayed, and it takes 10 minutes to create a new simulation. And you can, like, within an hour, within an afternoon. And what's really cool is we have a system that enables you to fire up new Amazon EC2 servers every time you run simulations. So you could have 100 Amazon EC2 servers running simulations for you in 30 minutes, right? Like, that kind of compute power is insane, right?
Let me go back then to this idea of the Renaissance, because this is the way I picture it for a lot of construction companies that I know, is that here I am as a construction company with jobs to build, with payroll to hit, with responsibilities to take care of. And then out here is this sort of buzz of technology. And there's a bunch of people bopping around doing their thing, saying, if you do this, then it'll revolutionize your construction company. Mm-hmm. And I see things that maybe would be useful, but at the same time, I've still got to do my work. So in your experience, the most innovative construction companies, how are they handling participating in this renaissance in an effective way?
Here's a really interesting kind of provocative thought that I've tried to think about or figure out. Here's a question: why do startups exist? Right? Okay. So I've pondered this. It's like, okay, sure, we can all tell each other that we work harder and we're smarter and 90, or we take more risk. But the truth of the matter is that these companies have billions of dollars at their disposal, right? So why the heck does a tiny little company like Alice exist? So I've racked my brains around it, and I've actually come up with what I think is the answer. It was a little bit of a depressing day for me. The reason that we exist is that, simply put, sometime in the 80s, 90s, probably you remember this better than I do, these big companies kind of sat down, maybe not really, explicitly, but this is effectively what happened. They kind of sat down and thought to themselves, this whole R&D business is really risky, right? We got to hire like the top people, and they're lots of smart folks, and they're very expensive, and we put them in a room and they think stuff up. The rate of failure is really high, right? So someone along the line said, hey, I got this idea. Why don't we just outsource our R&D departments? Right. And what we're going to do is we're going to call them startups. First, it was like, wait, you're going to let go of R&D? That doesn't sound like a good idea. And the answer to that is, hold on, but think about it. Let the VCs take the risk, right? We take like 99% less risk. We have 1,000 more R&D departments we can pick from, right? Sure, we lose a little bit of control, but if we really like those companies, we can buy them in the end, right? Or we can buy their service, right? And the truth of the matter is that what we really need to do as a construction company is figure out how to connect these various R&D departments together. So that's what's going on.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing there is then there's a necessary mindset shift that a construction company executive or CEO needs to have in order to participate in this renaissance that you're describing.
What's really interesting is that when we started the company 2015, I used to think like, oh, we're really lucky. We get to work on the cool stuff. Like we get to work on the AI, and if I was at a construction company, I wouldn't get to do that. What's interesting since today, no matter who you are, you're playing that game, and if you're not, you should be, because the fundamental, like if you're in a construction company today, like, holy cow, it's incredibly exciting because instead of at Alice, we get to work on this one thing, which is an amazing thing. The first generative construction simulator in the world, like holy schmoly, like this is incredible. The technology, like, boy, it sucks off. Yep. But if you're sitting in a construction company, you're like, hey, I can, link Alice to Versatile Natures or Bridget or Doxel or any one of these other, exciting, Canvas build robotics, right? Dusty robotics, right? Like all of the, the question you're asking is, how do I build a portfolio of these companies? And I keep saying this, that there's a new ecosystem coming at us in our field, right? That ecosystem is going to be data driven. The fundamental currency of that system is data. And, this new ecosystem is going to get decided by a few players today, right? And so the question that you really are asking yourself is how do you combine these startups? How do you combine these R&D departments into, your company's processes?
Yes.
And in order to do that, like the one thing, like, I was, Eric Law at Swinnerton, right? I was watching, and he really was a great guy. He shared exactly how they're thinking about it. And he popped up this slide and it had the data flows. Here's what the processes look like. Somebody comes in on a construction project, they update progress. It goes into this system, this startup, this system communicates with this, goes there. Like that kind of a diagram of how the data is flowing in the company, right? Is, the CEO of a construction company doesn't have the time to do that. Right. Which means, if you're a junior person in a construction company and you start working on that, that's going to, make your career. Right. And it's going to enable, you to really be one of the key people that defines how that construction company works. Right. And I guess the last thing I would say is, I keep saying this, the fundamental value proposition of the general contractor is changing. The general contractor of the future will be successful based on three things. How effective are you at identifying these new technologies, i.e. getting in touch with these R&D departments? How effective are you at evaluating them? And how effective are you at integrating them?
Okay.
That's what the name of the game is about. Because fundamentally, the other way to think about it is, how effective are you at leveraging that $170 billion that just went into construction research?
Okay, let's just stop here real quick then. So this is really interesting. Your proposition then, your contention is that a GC must be effective at identifying, evaluating, and then integrating new technology. That's the game.
Absolutely.
So then I'm a GC. I'm 50 years old. I'm the president of my GC, my company. I got another 15 years to go, but I came up in the early aughts, and so I know that the technology is there. I may be halfway comfortable with it, but I've still got to run my business, quote unquote. That's my mindset. What is the one position I need to create within my company in order to go through this process of identifying, evaluating, and integrating new technology, taking advantage of that $170 billion?
So the one position I would create is and I've had that role, and I've worked with people that have had that role. I don't know it's not a data scientist. It's more like a process and data flow captain.
Okay.
Right. And, she, would basically sit there and say, hey, what are the, 3 or 4 startups that we want to work with? What data are they going to generate, and how is that data going to basically get integrated into our existing system, right?
Yes.
What's our current ERP system, right?
Yeah.
What are the entry points in that ERP system, right? And so, here's a typical daily report that's filled out. Here's a monthly report that's filled out. How do you aggregate that data back into a CEO or a COO or a VP of construction dashboard, right?
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that you want to be thinking about. And then the question as a CEO, if I was a CEO of a company, the question that I would ask is, I would say, okay, great. What are the metrics that you want to be measured by?
Right.
So what I want to do is the first thing is, do you have visibility, right? So that's the easy, low hanging one, right? So are you giving me visibility in these projects? I.e., do I know that something is off track faster than I would normally know?
Right.
The second is, do I have the ability to correct for it faster? Right.
Yes.
And so there's lots of different ways, right? Like, for example, with Alice, what you're looking for is, okay, can you mitigate, delays faster than you normally could, right? Better, more effectively, more efficiently, right? Man, the answer is yes, right? With other technologies, maybe what I'd look for is, Is it faster to, fill out those daily timesheets, right? Am I saving money that way, right? Sometimes the ROI analysis is really simple. Sometimes it's more complex, right? But, that's what I would do. And I would say, okay, what's the innovation strategy, right? Which of these, quote, R&D departments, and also AKA startups, right, are we going to work with, right? Yep. And, select, let's pick 3, right? Let's pick 2, let's pick 5, whatever that number is, I definitely would not go above 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, in the first thing. And what's really interesting is consulting companies have figured this out. Yep. We got talked to by, one of the top 3 firms in the world. They came to us and said, hey, we're interested in Alice. And so we're like, what the heck? Like, why on earth would you guys be interested in Alice? And I was like, no, this doesn't make any sense, right? These guys, are strategic consultants. Like, and then the truth of the matter is that I realized that they've figured out exactly what I just said, right. Which, what they're doing is they go to the construction companies and they say, hey guys, take a wild guess. There's 1,000 startups out there.
Yep.
We've done the hard work. We figured out the best 10.
Yep.
For you, what you guys need are these specific 3. And what we're going to do is help integrate those 3. And the minute I heard that, I was like, okay, well, they're going to get paid just as well as we're going to get paid, because there's no way that I can play that game. Like me as CEO of Alice Technologies, I can't go to a company and say, let me help you build out your integration strategy across, 3 or 4 different startups, right?
Right.
So they're, what the consultants are doing is they're doing exactly that. They're helping you identify, right, evaluate and integrate these companies. Yep. And they've done a lot of the identification and evaluation already. So now they can focus on the integration, and you're like, oh, that makes complete sense, right? So everybody's happy. No matter who you are in the ecosystem, you've got this incredible game you can play if you want to play it.
Yep. So what I heard there is that my responsibility as the CEO, as a member of the executive team, is to identify those key metrics that I'm interested in, that I need to be able to have visibility on, and then task someone, whether it's an internal person like that process and data flow captain that you said, or an external consultant like you just described, to identify, evaluate, and then integrate the solutions.
Absolutely. So the way that I did it, because that was my job for a while. That's how I funded my PhD. Yeah. Right. And so the way I did it is I was kind of like, well, we're going to do the numbers on the spreadsheets, and we're going to have the toys. So number in the spreadsheets are the data. Right. So fundamentally, your ERP system sits on top of data. Right. Most people don't like to mess with it. They want the 3D and the 4D, and they want the fancy toys. So the way I would do it is I'd say, look, guys, you get to play with the toys if you give me the data. Right. Right. So if you basically sit down and basically help me, if you basically sit down and give me the data that I need, right, to run the system, then as a reward, we'll give you guys the toys that you're looking for. A lot of here's what I would warn anybody that's going into the innovation game. It is really easy to be a lot of fluff. Yes. And that's the thing that drives me. I'm allergic to it. Like at Alice, we said from day one, we are not building another goddamn friggin' vaporware that's ugly. Right. It's gotta friggin' work inside out. It's gotta be. We call it nuclear proof. That's what we internally call it. Right. Right. Software is nuclear proof. It friggin' works, right? And so, the thing with these, a lot of the innovation that happens is it tends to focus a lot on the toys, right? Which is what I call it, which is, focus on. Give me an example of the toys. Give me what does that mean? So people can avoid the toys. Okay, here we go. So hey, there's this new tool that allows you to model in 3D. It's called BIM. So when I was doing it, that was the thing. So we're like, oh, okay, so well, we're gonna model this building in BIM. Hey, but why? What did we really gain out of it? Right. Was there something, did we extract the quantities out of the BIM? Ooh, wait a minute. There we go. So if I extract the quantities out of it, what kind of quantities can I extract? Maybe for reinforced concrete. When I extracted those quantities, did I use them to basically calculate the unit costs or the costs for the concrete? And did that make me more effective in my bid or in accepting bids from contractors for concrete? Right. That's a use case. That's something I can measure, right? Right. Today, for example, folks will be like, oh, well, I'm going to, there's a lot of these data capture companies, right? Companies that capture what's going on in the field, right? Yep. So I'm going to go and capture that data, right? And so, okay, great. But what data did you really capture, and did it really help update the schedule, or was it done manually, right? That's another one, right? So you see the difference between running a tool, right? Running a software, running a robot, right? Versus, hey, is it feeding into my ERP system, right? And so those are the kind of things where, okay, we implemented an easy one, timesheets, right? It's great. Well, the timesheets, folks have filled it out. Now I have an electronic version of those timesheets. We've reduced the number of time I needed. Also, I'm sure there's, insurance implications and so on and so forth. Okay, well, that's a success, right? Yep. And then Like the question that I would ask anybody in innovation, right, is show me the data flow.
Okay.
If you don't have it, then I call BS. I'm like, no, you should be aware of what data are these darn things generating and where is the data going?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And if you have that piece of the puzzle, it should help, right, enabling that the innovation doesn't just kind of float. Because what will happen, and I've been there myself. I'm telling you this stuff because I've been bloodied by it many times over. Right. We rush off into the sunset with this cool toy, but then it's like, okay, we everybody around it was cool, but what's the impact, right? And the way that I've learned to kind of ensure that impact is the data integration.
The data integration. Okay, so I want to take you back to this process and data flow captain, because what's popping into my mind is a unicorn. And the unicorn is the person who understands construction in their bones and understands technology and the possibilities of what technology can do. That's your unicorn, right?
Sure.
Now, how many of those unicorns exist within your typical general contractor that, we know a bunch of them here in the Bay Area that are, they're doing anywhere from $100 million to $1 billion,
The truth is, I actually don't think it's that difficult or rare.
Okay, tell me then. That's good. Help me here with my mindset.
Sure. Here's why. Let's assume that, you're the CEO of a company and I work at that company, right?
Right.
And I'm, been there for 4 years, graduated 4 years ago, got a little bit of construction experience, know how to pour a slab, knows, what an RFI is, kind of gotten the basics down. And so you say, hey, René, why don't you become this sort of process czar, right? Process captain, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
I go, okay, great. So, maybe I don't know a lot about technology, but what I'll do is I'll kind of sit down and the first thing I'll do is I'll map out our existing process, right? And you can do those, there's lots of different levels of detail. I did this. This is exactly how I did it. I sat down and said, okay, well, the company I was working for in the Netherlands at the time, had pre-construction, construction, managed construction, handover, right?
Yep.
So that was really simple. Great. So that's a process. So then what happens in pre-construction? Well, the bids go out, we submit a bid, the estimator does some work, the scheduler does some work, this estimator has to produce an estimate, the scheduler has to produce this, So here's the documents. So you always boil down to these four things, which is people, processes, software, documents.
People, processes, software, documents.
Right.
Yep.
And so, the people are the ones that do the processes. Processes are what they're doing, right? And documents are the checks, either the inputs to the processes or checks that the process has been completed.
Right.
Software, right, is what makes this scalable. That's what the software does.
Yeah.
Right. Like sometimes if you were to, write out, 100 lines or whatever, it would take you forever. So that's how it works. So these are the four entities of any operational management system. So the first step is you map out the existing process because, and then obviously with any software you bring in, you're like, well, how much is it going to change my existing process versus, how much do I need to change what I'm doing versus how much is it going to, enable what I'm doing?
Okay, so hold on, just slow down there. So I'm thinking about using a software tool of some kind, and I'm asking myself, what is the impact going to be on my processes? Is that what I heard right?
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
100%. So that's how I used to do it. And so then you're like, okay, so once you've mapped this out, this point, shut the startups out, right?
Yeah.
Your company, and it's not perfect, right? I mean, different superintendents might, be like, screw the process. I'm going to do what I want, right? But, what is the rough way how we do business, right? Some companies, don't have it. They're like, oh no, we just hire smart people. That's one way to do it. I would recommend having some kind of a rough idea of here's how we would like to do business, right? Then you look at it and you're like, okay, well, what do we think? And then it becomes a question of, okay, well, what takes the most amount of time is the most risk, right?
Yep.
So me being Alice, I'll be like, oh, well, of course, it's the managing of the construction process itself.
Okay.
Like once you're in construction, how do you manage that risk? How do you manage the labor and the equipment, et cetera?
Right.
So let's assume that you look at it and you go, well, okay, that's something that I think about. Or alternatively, like I'd never thought of that because I've never heard of something called Alice. So I go out there and I talk to, I call a few friends. A really easy way to do this, by the way, is to get on the construction innovation venture capitalists.
Right.
Fundamental, brick and mortar, fifth wall, building ventures, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go to those websites, look at who they invested in. So they have done the hard work for you, which is they've talked to 1,000+ startups and invested in the best ones. So you're like, okay, well, now I've got a list of 50 names. I look at it and I'm like, well, which of this stuff is interesting? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find the startup or the idea, the research department that's going to help with the biggest problem I have, but is most effective at solving it.
Yep.
And there's a bit of a balance, right? Because some companies might be really effective at solving a problem like timesheets, but you're like, that's not that, that's not that much value add.
Yes.
Other companies might be less effective at, for example, data capture from site, but that's a huge problem, right? So if I could, solve 30% of it, that would be a big deal, right?
Right.
I kind of start, mapping those startups, right, to the processes, right? And I'm like, okay, so I'm now have an idea of what's out there, right?
Yep.
And so, I've gone to the venture capitalist websites. I've picked up I'm really giving you like the secret sauce of what I would do.
The secret sauce is good.
Yeah. So then you're like, okay, so then I would narrow it down, then go to the CEO of the company and say, hey, here's what I've mapped out. Here's what our process looks like today. Here's the data that's available. Here's our daily reports, monthly reports. And, I can assure you that, anybody that tells you we have all the data is bullshit, right? There's going to be lots of holes in it. So you're like, okay, so then the name of the game is that we want to be better 6 months from now than we are today.
Yes.
So that's what I'm trying to explain is you don't need to have this isn't like you need a PhD in technology or optimization. It's a slow iterative process about business processes and improving them.
Yes.
Right. And so, and often.
So let me just recap real quick, just so we got it. You've got someone mapping out your processes, and you can start, from pre-construction all the way to billing, whatever. But you map the processes. You pick a pain that you can really focus on to get some movement on. The
processes you want to map out at multiple levels of detail. So I'm trying to explain is that the way you map out processes, they tend to be boxes of, do X and, another box. But that box can then, in a separate document, get expanded.
Yes.
And when I mapped out processes, I had 3 LODs, 3 levels of detail. Right?
Yes. Yep.
The big one, which was pre-construction, construction, manage, handover, right?
Yes.
And I think bidding or whatever the heck it was, right? That was kind of the main one. And then so pre-construction was A. So I took A and I broke it down into another document.
Right.
And then sometimes especially because we're a construction company, so for the construction piece, when I broke it down further, there were some things where I really, really got nitpicky because I was like, I want to show you exactly the reports that we're generating and so on and so forth, right?
Yes.
So again, you don't have to go to map out every single last thing, but you're a construction company. So hint, probably the stuff that you want to get detailed on are how do you manage cost and schedule, right?
Yes.
How is it done today, right?
Yes.
And so, and yeah, you're gonna, some people won't like it because you're showing, they want a little more opaqueness, right? Other people will be on board, right?
Right.
And then what you need to then do is anyways, back to you. So you were kind of summarizing.
Yeah, no. So the summary basically is you map the process to whatever level of detail, you pick the pain, and then you source by tapping into the work that other people have already done.
Exactly.
That one little hook there of going out to the venture capitalists and figuring out who they're pouring their money into, because you're figuring these guys aren't stupid. They're at least gonna have half a clue of what's going on, and begin to get a roster of companies that could possibly address that pain.
Exactly. So if you go to these 5 companies that I mentioned, these VCs, you'll probably end up with a list of 50.
Yep.
Those are the 50 best companies in the world. Brilliant.
Yep.
So you take a look at the 50 and you're like, okay, well, what do I want to work on, right? And that's the part that, you're the one that's calling the shots, right? So you're like, well, I want to, robotics. That sounds friggin' cool, right? Let's go with Canvas, right? Let's go with Doxel, right? There's this AI, right? Let's go with Alice. Let's go, so then, and what I would recommend is you pick. You pick 3, pick 2, pick whatever the heck it is. Because now you're really saying, okay, I've got my processes. This company here is going to help with this piece.
Yep.
Right. Alternatively, then you can go to the CEO and say, hey, we need some, larger directive. Those larger directives can be, I want to digitize, I want to be a paperless company by 2028, right? Or I want to digitize, I want to use machine learning or AI or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
And so it's okay, we now have a larger directive from the CEO. Right. So okay, great. So how do these things tie into that larger directive? Right. If the directive isn't there, you can kind of come up with it yourself, right? What's the North Star? And you say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to basically 2 phases of implementing this stuff. Let's go for the easy stuff first. Let's go for the stuff that has the most impact, and then you go from there. And then you're like, what are the key metrics? Here's the thing that startups love, right, is if you give them a clear idea of how you're going to measure.
Right.
Like this, and it drives us nuts, right? Like we'll go get, people pay us a lot of money and we'll sit down and we're like, okay, well, how do you guys want to measure us? And everyone's like, yeah, whatever. Like, let's just start it. And we're like that really stresses us, because the issue is that, it's kind of like you're playing with the toys. And then 6 months later, you're like, well, what was the impact? And everyone's like, yeah, it was a great learning experience.
Right.
Nobody wants, not the startups, not the companies, nobody.
Right.
So, and what's really great is you're like, hey, here are the metrics I'm going to measure you by. I want you to reduce the time to do X. I want you to do this by Y. I want you, and then when you're done with it, you measure it and you're like, okay, well, what was my ROI? Hopefully you can take that, go back to the CEO of the company and say, hey, I asked you for, $150 or $250,000 budget for innovation or whatever, 50,000, whatever the number is. Here's the ROI. You gave me $50,000 a year ago and I returned 150.
Yep.
Now I want to ask for triple that number, right? And, Bob's your uncle, right? I mean, it's a really cool friggin' game to play, and this is how you play it. And that's like, no matter who you are today, whether you're working at a startup, founding a startup, researching it, doing the podcast, like there's just a lot going on and it's super, super cool.
So with that in mind, what is the one question a construction CEO should be asking themselves every night before they go to bed?
One question you've got to ask yourself is, how many machines do you control?
Okay. Why? Why that question?
It's the name of the game, right? How much data are you processing? How many machines? What's your analytics capability? Like, here's what I teach at Stanford, right? The cost of an Amazon EC2 server is, I believe it's 1.3 cents an hour.
Okay.
So what we've seen, the pattern that we've seen over and over again with AI, right, is people, get worried, like, is it going to take my job? No, I've just kind of told you how the game works, right? The thing that you'll see over and over again with technology is that what the AI does is it becomes the entity that does the crunching.
Yep.
Human becomes the entity that sets it up and interprets the results.
Right. So humans set it up and interpret it. The AI does the number crunching.
Exactly. And then what will happen in the future will somebody invent a new little piece of the puzzle, and the thing that you were setting up today will then get set up by the AI, and you get to take a step out and set up the bigger piece of the puzzle. Right. And that's over and over again. And I have not seen absolutely anything in the world that is going to change that in the near future. Those darn things, they don't have a consciousness. They're algorithms. That's what they do.
Right.
So one of the stories that, so you're like, okay, so what I tell students is, if you are going to base your career on number crunching, I hope you're going to be satisfied with a salary of about 1.3 cents an hour.
Yeah, right.
If on the other hand, you're going to be the person that sets these machines up and controls them, right, you are going to have a very long and very lucrative career.
Right.
And so the question that I would ask as a CEO of a company is how many of these darn machines are we controlling? Like, how many of these R&D departments are we leveraging?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's fundamentally, like, how am I leveraging that $170 billion of research, right? How am I ensuring that my people at this company are not spending their time on that 1.3 cents an hour stuff,
but
spending their time into setting up the systems, the machines, and getting them to communicate.
That's key right there. So that number crunching that you've got your people doing is worth 1.3 cents an hour. It's not worth anything. It's already being done by the servers.
Yeah, 100%. And that's like when we take Alice, right? We go to talk to schedulers, right? And it's like, yeah, but I'm the guy that back in the day, people would come to me and ask me, well, there's a delay. What do I do? And I sort of wave my magic wand and sort of say, okay, I either give you a gut sense answer, or I kind of sit there and crunch sort of, tasks and constraints, right? It's like, you're wasting time. There's no way a human being can crunch 3,000 tasks in their head.
Right.
It's not possible. What you're very good at doing is you got a gut sense for, when I crunch it, it probably looks something like this, right?
Right.
But yeah. And what's interesting is that, like, people have come to us in the last, few months and have said, I never thought I've had two people literally call me and say, I never thought I'd say this, but I like scheduling. Like, it's eliminate the dirty work, the dumb work, right? Structural engineers don't sit there doing finite element analysis, right? They get to think about structures and how those structures behave. Same with this, right? So, and like, every person will tend to start liking a certain piece of this. Someone might like to do the sourcing of looking for the startups or interviewing. Somebody might like doing the data stuff, right? I kind of always enjoyed it, right? It seems boring as hell, but you're like, I'm actually understanding how this company is running, right? Because I understand the underlying data transfers that are happening inside.
Right.
Like what I'm trying to explain is like, some people might be like, oh no, I want to go learn the tool, right? That's my thing, right? I'm going to be the girl or the guy that basically learns the tool, right? So
Yep.
that's kind of, how it works, right?
So it's interesting. We began our conversation. We're talking about the orchestra and the construction crew, and we're diving into this idea of simulation versus scheduling, and we've been talking about Alice quite a bit here. Now, Alice is not a person. Alice is your company. René, can you tell us a little bit more about what Alice does and who you do it for?
Alice is the world's first generative construction simulator. So what it enables you to do is it enables you to take a construction project, set it up, and then build it 100 different times.
Right.
It's taken about 13 years of my life to figure this out. About 35,000 hours. We've cracked it through and through. We work with some of the biggest clients in the world on some of the biggest projects. Parsons, we're doing the high-speed rail in the UK. We're doing the Edmonton rail. We're doing some projects in Texas. We tend to work on jobs that are 100 million and up.
Okay.
That will change with the release of what we call the 2D version. So
okay.
Alice currently needs a BIM. You import a BIM and then you set it up that way, and you optimize the construction of the BIM model. We are releasing a 2D, and so that will enable the mid-level market, so projects in the 20, 30, 40, $50 million range to start using the software.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so what you focus on is reduction in project duration, labor cost savings, equipment cost savings, those kinds of things?
Yeah, on average, you save about 17% on the duration and about 13% on labor and equipment costs. Interestingly, like this is also, we've seen this pattern at Stanford over and over again. Like when you run something in a computer, multiple options in a computer versus, doing it by hand, you'll tend to see about that 20-25% improvement.
20 to 25% improvement if you're running it through the computer.
If you run lots of options. So if you
Lots of options, yeah.
If you can generate, 1,000 solutions versus one by hand, you'll tend to see that 20-25% improvement.
It's interesting because you said earlier, I found this fascinating, is that, and this happens in construction all the time, I've got a problem. I know I can't run all the data, so I rely on my intuition. And that can be effective at times, but not effective at others. And what I'm hearing what Alice is doing is it takes into account perhaps your intuition, but it enables you to really generate way more different data points and scenarios for you to be able to choose from.
It's the name of the game. It's not AI. It's not artificial intelligence. It's IA, intelligence augmentation. A lot of people, kept asking me early on, so much pressure. You got to solve it using neural nets. You got to get the computer to tell the human what to do. And I'm always like, oh my God, like, no, the construction person, they've got 20 years of context.
Yes.
Right. They've got 20 years of understanding how the, darn things get built.
Right.
Why the hell would we not leverage that?
Right. So that's
not only that, it's also, if you don't leverage that, like you come to somebody with 20 years of experience and you give them a schedule or you give them a simulation, they're just like, what the hell is this? Like, why am I going to believe it?
Right.
Where do the assumptions come from?
Right.
That's the thing. It's like I intuitively knew this, right? Because I'm a second generation civil engineer. It's like, you've got to leverage that.
Right.
You tell me, the construction person, tell me the software, tell me as Alice, right? What are the assumptions?
Right.
What are the rules? How do you think? Like the value of a structural engineer is not crunching finite element analysis. The value of a construction person is not crunching constraints. The value of an architect is not creating copies of blueprints. An architect understands, materials and space and time and how these things come together. A structural engineer understands how structures behave, and a construction person understands how construction behaves. That's their value. Leverage the value.
That's great.
Let the machine do the crunching. Let the human do what they're best at.
That's great. I love that. Okay, so if people want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you, René?
It's really easy. AliceTechnologies.com. Shoot us an email. Don't take my word for it. Like I like to say, take it for a spin. It's super fun and it's very powerful. Yeah. I don't have a hard stop. I've got 30 minutes if you need to kind of ask.
Yep. So Alice Technologies, we'll link to that in the show notes. I do have another question. Tell me where the bleeding edge is in technology for construction at the moment, please.
Oh, that's a good one. So Stanford has this research group called SciFi, the Center for Integrated Facility Engineering, sci-fi.stanford.edu. You should check it out. I think it's the oldest construction management kind of research group, and they partner with industry. So, industry kind of comes in and they pay a little fee, annually, and that fee goes to funding research. funds the PhD students, which is really great. 100% of it goes to funding like research. And so every year I go sit there and kind of watch what the students are working on. And that's where this information comes from. What kind of struck me 2 years ago was that the bleeding edge of construction today is semantics. Like, what the heck is semantics, right? So, $70 billion gets poured into construction. All this research all these companies are digitizing aspects of the construction process, right? The supply chain is getting digitized, timesheets are getting digitized, the scheduling, the simulating, right? Data capture, all of that stuff, all that jazz is getting digitized, right? On the other hand, the bricks got to go on top of each other. You've got an analog reality. Two worlds need to communicate. Here's an example. Let's say that you do a data capture on progress. You go out, you take a point cloud, right? That point cloud is in a different format than the schedule, the plan,
right,
simulation.
Right.
So how do you convert the point cloud into the BIM? How do you convert the BIM into progress? Right. In order to do that, you need to start knowing things like what makes a column a column. In order to build a concrete column, I need to have 5 tasks. These tasks require resources. Those resources are labor, equipment, material, like teaching the semantic underpinnings of our field. And that's I call that the semantic translator between the real and the digital worlds.
Okay. So
edge.
Just real quick, for a dummy like me, give me what do you mean by semantic specifically?
Semantic is what makes a door.
Okay.
Right? Think about it. It's like, well, I know what a door is. Great. But how do you teach a computer what a door is? Oh, well, it's this big slab of wood between 2 roofs. Okay. Well, can it be metal? Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. Well, it's a big slab of something. Oh, so, well, what are rooms? Oh, well, it's 2 enclosed areas inside of a building. Okay, yep. Fine. Then, it has a handle that allows it to be closed and unclosed. That handle is usually around waist height. The door is usually somewhere around, 7 feet by, 4 feet.
Right.
And there's, 1 inch, thickness. So that's what a door is.
Yes.
So that, what is a column? Well, okay, if the column is the height of the column is usually 20 times the width or the length, right? And it's a structural element that holds up a column or a slab, right? So you're starting to see how it starts to get tricky.
Yes.
Right. And so that's what semantics are, right? And people, do PhDs, you can spend 6 years of a life trying to figure out what makes a door. And I assure you that the rabbit hole runs very deep. Right?
And so the bleeding edge then is just, again, say it one more time. The bleeding edge is what? Is
figuring out what is the semantic coding required of the various data formats that we have. So for example, a really easy way to think about it is how on earth do you convert a point cloud into a BIM? Right. Or alternatively, if I have the BIM, if I've converted the point cloud into a BIM, how do I know that the column being installed means that the rebar was put in, the formwork was put in, it got poured and it got, stripped, right? Right. Or, here's another one, right? So is the production rate, right, an attribute of the crew or an attribute of the task or an attribute of the element that's being worked on? Because a carpenter, the production rate's an attribute of the carpenters, but carpenters do lots of things. They install formwork, strip formwork, they, cut, saw, so on and so forth. So so the production rate is an attribute of the crew and the task. But 1 second, so in that case, carpenters installing formwork, but the production rate is different if they install formwork for wall versus column. Right. So the answer to that question has been answered in the construction literature, which is that the construction production rate is an attribute of the 3 things together. That's called. Okay. That's the kind of stuff that if you had a full semantic encoding of the data, you could there would be seamless integration across all systems, right? So that's the key right there. The idea of the semantic, the work that's being done with semantics is for the purpose of the integration and interpretation of the information in various places on the project. 100%. Well, you could start asking things like, theoretically, you could start asking like really complex questions. For example, query my database of past projects and tell me, what are the risk factors that led to the delay of, pouring concrete? And the answer would be, I've done it and I've realized that it's the inspectors, for example, that we're lacking, right? at what point would you be able to do something like that? We're a long ways away, but that's where the research is.
Right. Yep. Okay. Excellent. By the way, I found the Stanford Engineering Center for Integrated Facility Engineering. Is that the one you were referring to?
SciPE.Stanford.edu. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. I'll link to that in the show notes as well. René, you've been very generous with your time here. As we're wrapping up here, just by way of summary, give me 3 action items a construction CEO can take to participate in the construction renaissance.
First is designate someone to be the process and data captain.
Yes.
Because that's, and don't call them innovation person, because they might tend to go out and just buy a lot of toys. Right? Call them the process and data captain, right? And that is enabled by innovation.
Very good.
Right? So that's step 1. Step 2, figure out how you're going to identify, evaluate, and integrate, these 1,000 R&D departments that have suddenly cropped up at your disposal.
Yes.
Right. And 3, keep asking yourself, how many machines do you control?
Very good. Excellent. René, you've been very generous with your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I would like to get you back on the show again, because I have a feeling we have more stuff to talk about. So we'll put a bookmark there as far as this conversation is concerned. One last question. I know you're very busy working on Alice, but you're there in the Bay Area. If someone's visiting the Bay Area, what is the one restaurant they should go to?
One restaurant they should go to.
What's your favorite?
I eat the same thing every day.
There you go. You're too focused. All right.
El Farolito burritos. We get a super chicken burrito with sour cream and guac, and you'll be good.
That's what's I'm sorry, I missed the name of the restaurant.
El Farolito burritos on Mission.
El Farolito burrito on Mission.
El Farolito, that's right. Yeah.
Excellent.
Can't go wrong with that.
Awesome. Well, then we'll link in the show notes to the burrito place in the Mission. That's totally awesome. Thanks again for your time, René. Look forward to talking to you again, and appreciate your time here today.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Today's episode was brought to you by the Construction Conclave. If you as a construction leader would like to develop your skills and get involved in a community of like-minded construction professionals who are focused on building healthy teams, profitable projects, and long-term successful businesses, then the Construction Conclave is for you. It's a private, invitation-only group of construction leaders that are focused on developing their leadership skills. We do training every single month online that looks at how to become a better leader in a very practical, straightforward way. We also have other events that build community and camaraderie so that you can associate with others who are interested in developing their skills as leaders. If you'd like more information and to see if you qualify for participating in the conclave, feel free to reach out to me, eric@ericanderton.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and thanks again for listening.